For those that don't know, my name is Brandon Hinkle, and Wisdom Wednesdays, we are here. I love Wisdom Wednesdays. This is a time where we get to dive actually a little deeper in scripture and things of that nature, get to ask questions, and I'm just so honored to be before you guys, and so this is going to be fun. So if we got questions in the middle of the teaching, please ask. I love questions. I love interaction because I don't want to feel like I'm talking to myself, all right? You know, we family, so we all learning this together. Amen? Amen. So we are in the series this morning. Thank you, Ms. Teresa. We're in the series this morning. It's our Father series, and we are in the book of Ecclesiastes. And this is when Solomon, Pastor did an excellent job. Man, I hate that I got to come after him. He did an excellent job last week going into the first chapter and second chapter. I'm going to be in the second chapter of Ecclesiastes today, talking about Solomon. And Solomon was at a point of his life where it's near the end of his life, but he's looking back on what happened before. And some of the stuff he said, man, it could be just depressing. I mean, some verses says everything is fruitful, or I read the NIV, so it says everything is meaningless. That's how you start the chapter. Meaningless. Everything is meaningless. So I'm thinking to myself, man, I'd like to go get me some lamb chops. That's meaningless. But it's just when he looks over his life and he looks at everything he was doing apart from God, it was meaningless. And that's what we're going to dive in today. I'd like to, excuse me for a sec. First start off by saying that the book of Ecclesiastes is one of the books in the Bible that's considered the wisdom literature. Wisdom literature. Everybody say wisdom. Wisdom literature. So, I learned this later on. The Old Testament is broken down into 4 different sections. All right? You got the Torah, which is the law, so the first 5 books of the Bible, okay? Then you have the historical books, Joshua, Judges, 1 Kings, 2 Kings, 1 Chronicles, 2 Chronicles, Esther's. Those are considered the historical books. Then you have what's called the wisdom literature, which consists of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Job even. Job is considered, the wisdom literature. Psalms and Song of Psalms. Then you have the prophets, the major prophets and minor prophets. Isaiah, Jeremiah. So those are that's how the Old Testament is broken down. That's how it's broken down. So this book is in the wisdom part of the Old Testament. Let's go ahead and go to the, I'm going to break down Ecclesiastes as overall. So I'll give y'all a totality of what we're diving into. So let's go to so this book, Ecclesiastes, has 4 sections. Okay? Can we get to that? Can we get that on the screen? There we go. All right. So I'm only doing this so you guys can get a better grasp of what we're diving into and what is still to come. So the first section, chapters 1 and 2, it basically talks about Solomon's personal experiences. He's basically going through his personal experiences apart from God and seeing how things worked out for him. You know, he would say stuff, this guy, he would say everything is meaningless. Generations come and generations go, meaningless. It's lightweight depressing. Like, man, you had fun, but you see it wasn't worth it. Then the second section is a general observation. So this is Solomon gives you an observation of things that he learned. So section, is that me, Keith? I'm sorry. Got you. Apologize. So the second section is, chapters 3 to 5, it's a general observation. So this is when you get to a time to die, a time to live, a time for war, a time for peace. Also, he talks about how advancement is meaningless. He says stuff like, I just had to quote this. He says stuff like, better a poor but wise youth than the old foolish kings who no longer know how to heed a warning. He dropping bars. He says stuff like, in this section, whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. This is stuff that he's saying in this section. Just bars. Like when I say bars, think about a rap battle. When somebody say a dope lyric, that means it's bars. That's what that means. To all those that don't know what I'm saying. Bars. So, and then the third section is practical counsel. All right? He's just giving you practical counsel, practical wisdom, practical counsel for his life. This section, he says something very interesting to me. He said, do not be over righteous, neither be over wise. Why destroy yourself? What stood out to me, he said, don't be over righteous. And that can be hard to do. Because when you're trying to walk this walk with God, you're trying to make sure you're doing everything right. And then you become over righteous. Legalism. Can't relate to people. And the whole point of us doing this walk is for us to go get people to relate. To bring them to the kingdom. Don't be over righteous. That was like, man, bars, son. And then the fourth section is his conclusion on the whole book. And I'm sure Pastor is going to dive into this a lot more. I just want to give y'all an overview of what we in. Knowing Pastor, we might not even get through it. He might go somewhere else. He be led by the Spirit. Y'all know how he do. But I just want to give y'all an overview of what we read and what we into. Okay? So, today's lesson, today's title. What is the meaning behind what we do? What's the meaning behind what we do? You know, as we are in chapter 2, Solomon is very, very honest with life. He's honest about his actions. I mean, he built houses. He had the women. All this apart from God. It ended up being meaningless. And so, in life, and what I'm learning is, what's the meaning behind what I do? Even with serving. Am I really serving to serve God's people and seek the heart of God, or am I serving to be seen? You know, it's a talks now, you know, everybody want to be a millionaire, right? But what's the meaning behind you want to be a millionaire? Is it just so you can say you have millions, or are you trying to use that to help people? You know, a lot of people, what I'm seeing a lot with the generation that's younger than me is a lot of them really don't want to work for nobody. They want to go into their own business. And we need our own business people, the people who own their own businesses. I'm not knocking that. But this is my question to that, though. What's the heart behind it? Is it you want to be your own business because you see a need that you're trying to fix in the world? Or because you don't like to answer to authority? It's a vast difference that can be covered up. What's the meaning? What's the meaning? And when you read through this book, this book is very interesting. And what I'm seeing is the mercy of God through this book. Because he is warning us to not to chase the vain things of life, because it's meaningless. And in that warning is mercy. A lot of times we think mercy is, I done something and then I get let off the hook. But your mercy could be the warning that don't get you into trouble. Warning is mercy. Christ died years ago. That was mercy speaking for me today. Mercy. So, we get into this book, and as Solomon's analyzing his life, he's really doing what's called deconstruction. Anybody heard of deconstruction? Okay, what's the definition of deconstruction? Boy, I thought y'all heard of it. Tear it down, rip it apart. All right, this is the definition I wrote. To take apart or examine something in order to reveal the basis or composition, often with the intent of exposing biases, flaws, or inconsistency. So in a nutshell, you basically analyze it to dismantle to see what you really believe. Okay? Believe it or not, a lot of us deconstruct all the time. You got good deconstruction and you got bad deconstruction. Okay? I know personally, I had to deconstruct my beliefs on God. Because when I first learned about God, I learned about this wrath of God and nothing else. Like, I ain't heard nothing about God's grace for real until my 30s. Like, when you see those dudes on Kings Highway and National Bridge on the street corner, like, when I roll by them, I try to roll my window up. You know what I'm saying? Because all you hear was the wrath of God. But that was my misinterpretation of God, so I had to deconstruct that. So you got good deconstruction, and you got bad deconstruction. 2 years ago, before I came to this ministry, the ministry I came from, and this is bad deconstruction. The ministry I came from, we had two head pastors, all right? And they both, one was the older pastor, the other one was the younger pastor, and the younger pastor was married to the older pastor's daughter, so it was a family ministry. And both of them died within 2 years. Both died. One died of, heart just went out, that's the older one. And then the younger one died due to a brain tumor that went away, came back. And we was believing and hoping in God, and we getting prophecy that he's going to live. And then when he died, that shook my faith. So then I started to deconstruct what I really believed, because it didn't make sense. It didn't make sense. Now, thank God that it didn't lead me off this path of the great falling away of me searching out other things. But to a certain degree, when people walk away from the faith, that's normally what happens. They deconstruct their faith and say that this ain't working, and then they go get into other things. Occults, witchcraft, other belief system. So I thank God that I didn't do that. But believe it or not, a lot of our college kids, when they go off to college, they have deconstructed their faith, believe it or not. Let me give you this statistic. This statistic. 50 to 88% of students after leaving college no longer identify themselves as a Christian. 50 to 88%. And you got college professors who are not Christian who's teaching against our faith. That's why it's important for us to really pour into the wise students and the wise kids, because they need a solid foundation to know that what they know before they leave and go off. It's sad. So Solomon is basically deconstructing what he's been through in life. And he's seeing that everything he's been through, everything he's gone through, everything he did apart from God ended up being meaningless. Meaningless. And so I want to get into this. I'm going to pick off where Pastor left off. Ecclesiastes chapter 2, starting with verse 10. Ecclesiastes chapter 2, start with verse 10. All righty. This boy here, boy. This boy Solomon. I deny myself nothing my eyes desires. He just got it how he lived. He just got it how he lived. I refused my heart no pleasure. So whatever he saw he liked, he got it. My heart took delight in my labor, and this was my reward for all my toil. Next verse. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and all what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. Interesting. You know, I can resonate with this verse so much. I dedicated my life to God back in 2010, but starting in 1999 to 2000, I got into the music business. I worked into the music business, and the music business is interesting business, to say the least. And so I got into doing promotions and promoting artists. And I'm not talking about not just local, I'm talking about national artists. I would promote them here, get them played on the radio here, in the clubs, and promote albums. So I've been a part of some big projects, like platinum projects, you know what I'm saying? So around 2009 going to 2010, let me back up. I loved it. I love the accolades that came from it. The notoriety came from it. Like Pastor Sim talked about, he was the Puffy Combs of the club. He's a little older, so he probably was. But for me, it was nothing to walk into any club with as many people as I want, and people would stop the line to get me through. I mean, like, it was. I just had all the connections in the city. Like, this was my city. And you had to be like, to work for the labels, you had to own that. Like, if the label's hiring you to do something, you had to be the man in that city. So I was. So at this time, I was in a relationship, and I wasn't living the best brand I should live. I'm going to leave it at that. I wasn't as holy as I was now. You know, I'm out in the club. I'm out in the club 2, 3 in the morning. If they want to go to the east side, 5, 6 in the morning. I'm in the studio 2, 3 in the morning. I wasn't living the best. I wasn't the best Brandon, I know. So around 2009, 2010, I ended up, the relationship I was in ended up breaking off. And that broke me down tremendously, mentally, emotionally, things of that nature. And I'm never going to forget this one day. So I'm out of town with an artist, with a group. I'm out of town. I was working with Dirty ENT at the time, so I'm out of town with the Lunatics. And they performing at Tampa Bay at the Devereaux Stadium. That's the Major League Baseball stadium. All right? So they performing there. And then Murph had an after party after that. So I'm out of town, and people could tell that I just wasn't myself. I have people come like, "You cool?" I'm like, "Nah." I'm like, "Yeah," but really, no. And I'm in the settings of the club, and we got drinks and people, you know, people all around us, and I'm ready to go home. Like, I'm really ready to go home because I was just depressed. And at that moment, it really hit me like everything, all this popularity that I worked up for, to be popular, to be known, to be the man, it don't matter. Like, it don't feed me nothing. It's no fulfillment right now. It's no, at that moment, it was meaningless. So I understand this verse. Success doesn't bring fulfillment. Your connection with God is what brings fulfillment. It was nothing that could be done in that moment that made me feel any better. So I realized I had to run to God. And that's what started this journey. Now, I didn't part ways from my company until, because I had a marketing company at the time, so I didn't part ways from that until 2017. So this is 7 years later. But I realized at that moment, at that point, this stuff is meaningless. Meaningless. So that leads me to my next point. Ecclesiastes 2:17. Man, this time be flying, man. So I hated life. This man, Solomon, boy, he really was deconstructing some stuff. So I hated life because the work that is done under the sun was grievous to me. All of it, meaningless. A chasing after the wind. So ever since that point in 2010, like I'm still, like I have a company, like we have an office, you know what I'm saying? Like we paying bills, like I have a marketing company. And over the course of those 7 years, my passion for the company diminished. To the point where my business partner literally pulled me to the side and was like, this is your paper, either you're gonna do this or you're not. And I signed my name off on the company and just walked away. Because at the end of the day, the business I was in, I didn't love it no more. I hated it. Like, one thing about being a business owner is, for most businesses, you got to find new work. You got to find new customers, right? Well, for me, new customers was a burden. Every time new artists say they got a project that they want us to promote, I'm like, man, here we go again. Like, when would it stop? And really, I wanted to, my goal was to be a exec, a record exec, to work for one of these major labels, like to go to like Chicago, to be a regional, or go to New York. That was my goal. And the opportunity did come up it came up, it was a suggestion that came up, but it didn't happen. And later on, through a prophet, I found that the God blocked it. Because if I would have took it, that would have been an idol for me. How much of your career is an idol to you? How much of your career is you doing, going hard to prove people that they counted you out? Even with this, like I know I got a calling on my life with ministry, right? So I have to monitor why I'm doing things in ministry. Because we can deceive ourselves and say we're doing it for God, but really we're doing it because other people counting us out, so we trying to show them our worth. Meaningless. And so I'm going to be a little transparent with this. Growing up, I have dealt with insecurities and things of that nature. So notoriety was food to a wounded soul. Being popular was was food to a bad soul. And so I have to really monitor the applause I get from you guys. Even though I want to know I hit home for you guys and you guys got the message, but I got to make sure that I monitor and compartmentalize that in the right way. So it won't be me trying to do it to please people. I heard a pastor say this. If you don't live for the praises of people, you won't fall to their criticisms. So I got to make sure that whatever message I give or whoever I pray for, that I'm giving them what God telling me to give them and walk away as if I've done my job. If I'm doing it for any other reason, it's meaningless. Meaningless. Man, I only got 5 minutes, y'all. I'm not going to do this. So I'm saying this to say we constantly got to examine our hearts. This is Paul said, I die daily. Right? We got to constantly examine our hearts daily. Constantly examine our hearts. I want to pull up some. Luke. Let's go to Luke. I want to go to Luke because I felt the Holy Spirit gave this to me. Luke 12, 16 to 21. Very familiar passage of scripture. And he told them this parable. This is Christ telling a parable, right? The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. Next verse. He thought to himself, what should I do? I have no place to store my crops. No place. Thank you for correcting me. Then he said, this is what I do. I would tear down my barns, build bigger ones, and there I would store my surplus grain. And I would say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Boy, he got a security plan, boy. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. Boy, he got his life planned, right? But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who would get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it would be for whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich towards God. What's crazy is Solomon says a similar thing in the previous verse. You storing up things and then you will give it to your son who you don't know how to take care of it for real. But we live in a society that pushes us to store up 401ks and to save things. What saving is good, but make sure you're doing it with the heart of God. If not, it's going to be meaningless. Like, this dude didn't go kill nobody. Think about what God did. He ain't kill nobody. He ain't lie. He ain't cheat. He just saved his stuff and was decided not to do nothing else, which is an act of selfishness. God don't like selfishness. Anything we doing should be selfless. That's why Christ came. He didn't come to be served. He came to serve. Selfless. So we got to think about that when we're putting together our retirement plans and working 80 hours of overtime. Killing yourself. We really got to think about that. I want to end it with this verse. Back to Ecclesiastes 2:24. And I hope we get through the whole book of this. This book is amazing. And he ends this chapter with this. A person can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in their own toil. I love this next verse. It said, this too I see is from the hand of God. This is what I love the most. For without him, who can eat and find fulfillment? That's verse 25. I'm sorry, I didn't give him that. He said, who could eat? Without God, who could eat? Provision is what he's saying. Who could have provision? And who could find fulfillment? Joy. Without God, all the millions, all the notoriety. Like, I know artists, I'm going to be honest with y'all. I know artists who sold millions of records who are not fulfilled. And no wonder why they consume themselves with drugs. Michael Jackson was the biggest artist this world probably has ever known. And he couldn't go to sleep? Think about that. Think about that. Ecclesiastes shows that certain paths of life leads to emptiness. This profound book also helps us to discover the true purpose in life. Such wisdom can spare us from the emptiness that results from a life without God. Solomon teaches that people would not find meaning in life through money, knowledge, pleasure, works, or popularity. True satisfaction comes from knowing that we are doing we are doing a part of God's purpose in our lives. This is a book that helps us free us from scrambling for power, approval, money, and draw us closer to God. I really want y'all to really analyze why you're doing what you're doing. What's the meaning? What's the meaning? What's the meaning you pushing your child to go this direction? Even though it might seem good, are you doing it to live your life through them? What's the meaning why you want to go and take this promotion? Is it just to get a bigger check, or is this really a purpose? What's the meaning? This really takes some examination on our part. And that's really all the Spirit gave me.